A wedding could take an entire year to finish. A single house often held animals, grandparents, and several married children, all sleeping under one roof. A courtroom in this era would not accept a woman's testimony at all. It did not matter how many women told the exact same story. Daily life 2,000 years ago in ancient Judea looked nothing like the calm, simple picture most people still imagine today. This video will answer 3 questions that rarely come up when people picture Jesus' world. First, what did an ordinary home and family actually look like back then? Second, what was Jesus' real job, and was it anything like a modern carpenter? Third, why does one strange detail about women and courtroom testimony make one of the most famous stories in the Gospels far more believable, not less? By the end, this ancient world will feel a lot stranger than the version usually shown in paintings and movies. Here is why this matters. Understanding daily life in this period is not just trivia. It changes how several major Bible stories should actually be read once the real cultural background comes into view. Start with housing. Most families in 1st century Judea lived in small homes made of mud brick or stacked fieldstone. These homes usually had just 1 or 2 rooms. Multiple generations often lived together under one roof. That included grandparents, parents, and married children with their own kids. At night, family animals were often brought inside too. A goat or a donkey might be kept on a lower section of the floor. This kept the animals safe and helped warm the house. Roofs were flat, made of packed earth, laid over wooden beams. Families used their roofs constantly. People slept up there during hot nights. They dried fruit and grain up there as well. They even held conversations and did chores on the roof, since it worked almost like an extra room in the house. Privacy, in the modern sense, barely existed. Most daily life happened in shared spaces, in full view of the extended family. Food followed a simple, repetitive pattern. Bread was the main part of almost every meal. It was usually made fresh each day from wheat or barley. Families added olives, olive oil, figs, dates, and whatever vegetables were in season. Fish was common near the Sea of Galilee. It was often dried or salted, so it would last longer without spoiling. Meat was rare and mostly saved for special occasions. Animals were more valuable alive, providing milk, wool, or farm labor. Jewish dietary law, known as kashrut, shaped which animals could be eaten and how they had to be prepared. Wine, usually mixed with water, was the standard drink for most people. It was often safer than plain water from questionable local sources. Now for Jesus' own job. Most translations call him a carpenter, but the original Greek word, tekton, means something broader than that. A tekton was a skilled craftsman who worked with his hands, building and constructing things. That could include wooden furniture and tools, but it could also include stonework and general construction. A nearby city called Sepphoris was going through major building projects during Jesus' youth. That growing city likely offered steady construction work for skilled craftsmen from surrounding towns, including Nazareth. So Jesus' early life may have looked less like carving furniture inside a quiet shop. It may have looked more like hard physical labor on active building sites, working alongside his father Joseph. Clothing was practical and modest. Most people wore a simple tunic, made from wool or linen, tied at the waist. Over that, they wore a heavier cloak, which doubled as a blanket at night. Jewish law required tassels on the 4 corners of that cloak. Those tassels served as a visual reminder to follow God's commandments throughout the day. Sandals protected the feet. Head coverings shielded people from the region's intense sun. Clothing was expensive and slow to produce by hand. Because of that, most families owned very few garments, wearing and repairing the same few pieces for years at a time. Family life ran on a very different marriage system than today. Marriages were arranged by parents, often for practical and financial reasons rather than romance. Before an actual wedding, a couple went through a period called betrothal. This period was already legally binding, even though the couple did not yet live together or start a household. Betrothal commonly lasted around a full year. Breaking it required an actual divorce, not just a simple change of mind. This custom directly explains a strange detail in the Gospel of Matthew. Mary was found to be pregnant during her betrothal to Joseph, before their marriage was finalized. Because of that, Joseph considered ending things quietly through formal divorce. That was exactly what the law of that time required for a betrothal, not yet a completed marriage. Purity laws touched nearly every part of daily existence. Certain conditions made a person ritually impure for a set period of time. That included childbirth, certain skin diseases, and contact with a dead body. Impurity was not considered sinful on its own, but it restricted a person's participation in worship, and it limited close contact with the rest of the community until they were purified again, often through ritual washing. This explains why several of Jesus' healing stories carry extra weight. When Jesus touched people with skin diseases, he was crossing a serious social and religious boundary. When he let a woman with a long-term bleeding condition touch his robe, he was doing the same thing. Most people in his society carefully avoided these situations altogether. Education and language added another layer most people never picture. Boys from ordinary families often received basic religious instruction through the local synagogue, learning to read and recite parts of the Hebrew scriptures from a young age. Girls typically learned practical household and religious skills at home instead. Daily conversation across Galilee and Judea happened mostly in Aramaic, a language closely related to Hebrew. Hebrew itself was reserved mostly for scripture and formal worship. Greek was useful for trade and communication across the wider region. Latin belonged to Roman soldiers and administrators. A single marketplace conversation could easily involve 2 or 3 of these different languages, switching back and forth within just a few sentences of ordinary talk. Roman occupation shaped daily life in ways that were impossible to ignore. Roman soldiers were a common sight in larger towns. Heavy taxation funded both local rulers and the distant empire itself. Crucifixion, the method eventually used to execute Jesus, was such a common Roman punishment for rebellion and serious crimes that seeing a crucified body along a public road was not considered shocking or unusual at the time. It was simply one more part of daily life under Roman power, though obviously not something anyone wanted to experience personally. Roman census counts, like the one described around Jesus' birth, also periodically forced families to travel back to their ancestral hometowns, disrupting ordinary life and work for weeks at a time, just to be properly recorded for taxation. Here is a detail that rarely gets mentioned, and it completely changes how one famous Bible story should be read. In Jewish courts during this period, women were not considered valid legal witnesses. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing around this same era, stated plainly that testimony from women should not be accepted in court, due to what he called the impulsiveness of their sex. That was the accepted legal standard of the time. And yet, in all 4 Gospels, the very first witnesses to the empty tomb after the resurrection are women. If early Christian writers were simply inventing a convincing story from scratch, choosing women as the first witnesses made no legal or cultural sense at all. Many scholars argue this detail actually strengthens the case that the Gospel writers were reporting something they genuinely believed had happened, rather than crafting the most persuasive possible legend for their own time and culture. So here is the full picture. Homes were crowded, shared, and far from private. Jesus likely worked in tougher, more physical labor than the modern image of a quiet carpenter's workshop suggests. Marriage began with a binding year-long betrothal that directly explains Joseph's reaction to Mary's unexpected pregnancy. Purity laws shaped who could be touched and approached in public, making several of Jesus' healing stories genuinely radical acts for their time. Roman power sat over daily life constantly, from taxation to public executions. And one buried detail about women's legal testimony makes the resurrection accounts a far stranger choice for anyone trying to invent a believable story from scratch. Daily life in Jesus' time was not simple background scenery. It was strange, restrictive, and in some ways worked directly against some of the Bible's own most famous stories, instead of supporting them. None of it looked like the quiet, simple version most people still picture today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to see more content like this and turn on the notification bell. Also comment what you think below.